Going back to what you mentioned, there were serious violations of human rights in your homeland, and you mentioned also that there have been cases where journalists have been attacked, or
journalists have been killed. To say openly, recently that lady, very young lady, talented, 26 years old, got.
Her name was Bella Klasova, and she was located in Karchay-Cherkessia. Her articles mainly talked about the lack of rights that Circassians have in the homeland. She also alluded to some criticisms of Sochi, and unfortunately this summer she was run over in front of her home. So it's actually pretty sad. And the personalities that have been assassinated over the last few years, especially this year, have ranged from a lot of different personalities. For instance, we have an assassination that happened in May, and it was Frau Sapsukov, who was a Circassian advisor to the president of Karchay-Cherkessia, and he had been nominated for prime minister. Right after his nomination, he was assassinated as well. Along with that, any type of Circassian rights or activism towards that is met by a lot of criticism and a lot of violence. And one very good example of that is Aslan Zukov, who perished this year as well after he had made his opinion known about some of the new land policies that are being put in place against the Circassians, as well as the lack of indigenous rights in general.
So we are speaking about, we may say even that there's an increase with this
absolutely.
Unacceptable process.
Yeah.
How is the investigations of these kind of assassinations?
Right. It's actually not that good. For instance, Aslan Zukov, his murder was not investigated. Bella's murder is pending investigation, and Frau Sapsukov's investigation is happening now. But for the most part, they just choose to ignore the assassination itself and choose to point fingers at other things.
And or it would start the investigation, they would start the investigation, and it would take a tremendous amount of time, and eventually it leads nowhere and it dies off. That's the typical result of any investigation against any violence and any crimes committed against any people who demand their rights of Circassians in the Caucasus. Eventually they would pretend that there is an investigation, and that investigation actually goes nowhere.
Kind of handwriting I have met before in history. Just changing slightly the subject and perhaps hoping to discover some happier aspects of life. You are active with cultural activities of Circassians.
Political and cultural, yes.
So normally cultural relations raise less suspicion and let's say even counteractions.
Yeah.
So how successfully can you cooperate on cultural issues with people who are living in Circassia?
Actually, if it is related to culture, for example, related to our dances, we have no any problem with that, because it has, how can I explain that? Our people, we love to live our culture, so as soon as you give a little bit right to live your culture, you can make happy. The population can be happy. So by giving that little rights, they can easily make an imaginary picture that our people are happy. But if you look at the real picture behind, we are really as I would say, there's an ongoing genocide against Circassian people, because there's lots of discriminations of human rights. Our people are executed, and we don't accept that even in homeland or diaspora, but we have no right to voice what we demand or what we want. And in diaspora, we have some organizations. We can go live our culture. We can come together with our people. We can dance. We can eat our food. We can make our music. But this is not the real core that can keep your heritage alive. You have to have the right to speak your language. You have to have a right to live in your ancestral lands. And we don't have anything to really survive.
How is the situation with education, with the schools?
In homeland, we have only 2 hours a week, and it is only if you choose you can learn your language. All the language at every levels are in Russian. We are not allowed to use our language. And related to our history, in history lessons, there's nothing related to Circassian history, actually. We were fighting against Russia for our freedom for 200 years. It is actually never happened in world history, but there is no single word about that in schools. So our children are raising with a fabricated world. This is not our reality. They are hiding our reality from our own people, also from all of the rest of the world. This is very, very sad and tragic for us. And if you would look at the Sochi Olympics that they will hold in 2014, that would be the real picture that it is all our history, all our reality. We exist in the world. Our existence will be hidden under the carpet in front of all the people of the world. And they will be celebrating with all that with all the people of the world without their awareness. This is very sad.
Yeah, you mentioned that the diaspora has been quite successful in maintaining your culture and cultural values. How about educational system in the bigger diasporas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For the past, since Circassians left the Caucasus in 1864, or forced actually with fire and death to leave the Caucasus in 1864, they migrated and lived in many different places of the world. In order to preserve their culture and their identity, they formed organizations in every country or in every community they formed. And the purpose of those communities was to keep the identity, to keep the culture, the language, and anything that can maintain their existence as a people, as a nation. And that served very well in preserving the language, the culture, and the Circassian identity for many generations, up until, I guess, the collapse of the Soviet Union, where the existence of those organizations became a threat as further fostering the Circassian character and the Circassian national identity. And then at the time when we were able to put together an international organization called the International Circassian Association, referred to as ICA, the Russian federations discovered that if those organizations are left to function, to serve the interest of the Circassian, then this somehow eventually would foster a threat to them in many different ways. So what they had done, they started infiltrating our organizations, mainly our main organization in motherland, that is the ICA, whereas many of the officers, the administrator of these organizations, are FSB officers who make sure that they would keep a tight lid on the functioning of those organizations, so Circassians would not get to a point where searching and finding and re-establishing their national identity will become a viable solution for their tragedy. That control on those in that organization had been extended and descended down to many other organizations we have throughout the world who otherwise would have been functioning to serve Circassians, and they have infiltrated many of our organizations with their sympathizers, sometimes with their agents, to make sure that we don't talk about anything that can be hurtful either now or in the future for the interest of the Russians in Circassia. Despite all this, we were able to keep our identity, we were able to keep much of our traditions, and we were able to produce generations who can get together in order to revive what remains of our character as Circassians.
Yeah, I must admit that I partially understand that problem with my own experience, because I very well remember what it means when you can't use your language at your own country. Yet our situation was slightly better because we could still have education at schools, etc. But we also relied a lot on the diaspora, which was much smaller than Circassian in numbers, but it was quite active and not very infiltrated. So we could rely on their assistance. And I wanted to ask a question of you. Perhaps you know that in Estonia in the end of 1980s and in 90s, beginning of 90s, we used the famous model which brought with the independence of India, a very big country, and we had the citizens' committees and Citizens' Congress, which became gradually a sort of representation of people of Estonia, and rose to the height of being the driving force in regaining the rights and finally the whole independence. So is there that kind of networking or some kind of organization in your case?
There is.